Good morning, Vanderbilt, and welcome to Terrier Talk, Episode 3. Today will be our first ever live stream. Terrier Talk is live this morning, 8:30, well, actually, it's 9 o'clock now, a.m. Central Standard Time, Sunday morning, January 20th. So, a couple of things before we really get into the nitty-gritty, get into the games for this week. We do not have a guest speaker this week because of the moving medium. Going from videos to live stream, I decided it would probably be better to, for this week at the very least, just have myself talking. In future weeks, I will look to have either guest interviews or speakers here with me, guests on the show. And speaking of that, there might be a bit of a different format for those guest interviews. The original idea was to have the guest interviews spliced into the video. But now with how I'm going to be doing live streams, I think it'll be a little bit better to maybe even have those as separate videos if they're just guest interviews during the week. So with that in mind, it's going to be different, but it'll still be there, and I'm going to hope to have one once a week. Also, I'm going to be uploading clips of this video for those who don't want to watch the full live with all the other things happening throughout the video. I will be uploading clips as well as this afterwards. I will be uploading clips of the video into my onto the YouTube channel. So, like, if you just want to watch girls basketball, I'll show the girls basketball review and preview of the week in one video. If you just want to watch girls soccer, I'll do the same thing. If you just want to watch boys soccer, boys basketball, whatever it is, when we get to baseball and softball and track later on into the year, and then even football, I will have those condensed into their own videos. The other thing I would like to bring up is the news this week of Coach Atwell. I'm not going to say anything specific about the how, the why, anything like that. I'm just going to say what happened. And Coach Atwell will not be joining us next season as the head coach of the football team. There's going to be a lot more news regarding that probably in the later weeks, in these coming weeks, in regards to who that new coach is going to be. But all I know as of now is that he will not be our coach for next season. I'm sad to see him go. I liked him. That's really all I'm going to say about it. But I hope whoever that new coach is, I hope we have great success next season. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more discussion about that when we get to the months of August and September, where there's a lot more football going on, and that new head coach, whoever he may be, she, who knows, whoever that new coach may be, will be able to propel this team wherever they are. There's going to be a lot more discussion regarding that. That's really all the other news going on today. I'm going to go ahead and go into the game recaps. We're going to go ahead and start with boys soccer. Boys soccer had 3 games, this week. Starting with St. Thomas Aquinas was an unfortunate loss, 3-0, but considering St. Thomas Aquinas and how good that team is, it could have been a lot worse. So we'll take this. I don't think people were surprised, like third-party people were that surprised by the result. And I'll talk about why in a minute. But we had a good showing. We played well. We tried our best. Just didn't come out on top. That happens. That cannot be said for the Lutcher game, where we absolutely dominated Lutcher. The final score was 8-0, which is a massacre. To be frank, that's a very, very strong victory and a very good game for Vanderbilt, despite the fact that we went 1-2 this week. That final game, being against East Jefferson later on in the week, was a 1-0 heartbreaking loss. Very unfortunate. I don't know many details regarding this game, because I really just know the score and the overview of the teams going into the game. But from what I've seen, despite the fact that we went 1-2 this week, it didn't seem to change many people's views on the team. We didn't lose very much in the power ratings. We're still, I think, where we were last week. In the power rankings, which is a poll that LA Preps does, we're still number 7. So I don't think it impacted us too hard. I think we played well. I think we played where we were supposed to play, excuse me. And I think we're going to be fine when we get into the latter half of the season. Excuse me. And even into playoffs, I think we're going to do just fine. I think we're going to do well. I'm going to go ahead and move on to girls soccer. Girls soccer last week had the main event. They went to St. Scholastica, which is one of the greatest girls soccer teams in the entire nation, let alone the state. They are undefeated. And unfortunately, St. Scholastica did remain undefeated after this week with a 5-0 victory against Our Lady Terriers. That one hurts. It does. It's a really big game every time that they play, but that one hurts. It's painful. But St. Scholastica is a great team. It's not. I don't want to say it's not surprising because, of course, this girls' soccer team is absolutely phenomenal. One of the best in the state, even one of the best in the nation. But St. Scholastica is great, and it showed in this game. What are you going to do? And it seems almost as if we were taking out our anger on Letcher later on in the week. We beat them 8-0, just like the boys. So what should have been a very eventful week for girls soccer was unfortunately not very successful in those events. In soccer in general, all those big games that we had painful, heartbreaking losses. Hopefully next week we'll have a much better outcome. We're going to move on to basketball now. We'll go to boys basketball. And last week, I said that both of these games are must-wins. And what did we do? We split them. We'll see how that goes. I'll go ahead and talk about the games separately. On Monday, we traveled to Thomas Jefferson, which is a 2.5-hour drive, and I think that did not help our case at all. We lost by 10 points, 65-55, and it was a game that we probably should have won, but we started out flat. It was a long road trip. Only so much you can do. Very unfortunate loss, and we did make up for a good bit in the Grand Isle game the next week. Funnily enough, number 20 is a great player on Grand Isle. He scored 30 points in our first game back in December, and the entire team did not score 30 points in their game on Wednesday when they came to Vanderbilt. We beat them 55-25, and they got embarrassed. It was a very good revenge game for what was a close win last time. We showed that maybe these two teams aren't as close as that first game's box score may have indicated, which is a good thing. Now, splitting these two games isn't great, but the long losing streak is at least over. That's a good thing. I'm happy about that. And hopefully we can take that little bit of momentum into next week and hopefully be much better, be able to perform next week. I'll talk about that, of course, when we get to boys basketball. And lastly, I have the girls basketball week, which, like I said last week, was a very important and very newsworthy week. And interestingly enough, it's actually almost as, if not more important, this week. And I'll talk about that, of course, actually as our main event. But as of now, I will discuss the girls basketball week last week. On Tuesday, they hosted the Edie White Cardinals, the Dirty Birds, and it was a very solid win. It furthered the team's reputation of great defense. I'll talk about the defense specifically in a minute. But the final score was 44-32, and Amy Barrett specifically actually came out this week, both in the Edie White and the Morgan City games, as maybe the team's leading scorer, which is good. It seems that the players that these girls have come into their own as to specific roles throughout the game. Amy and Leah both come out as scoring threats. Leah is a great ball handler. Brittany does what Brittany does. The other players having great roles on the team. And that's very good to see, that the team is coming into their own. And I think that shows as well in the Morgan City game. It was a game that last week I gave a lot of hype to. I talked about how terrifyingly even the matchup was, how close the matchup was. And that only showed for about a quarter. After a quarter, it was tied, 11-11. And in the second quarter, Brittany Terrier kind of took over. I think she had 9 points, which helped lead us to an 18-point second quarter, which is always very strong. And we sort of just coasted from there. And I think both of these games give the team much more of an identity than earlier on in the season. One thing I noticed when looking through the stats, not just in this week, but throughout the season in general, is we don't have a very strong start in most games. We tend to come out almost flat-footed. We tend to come out a little bit weaker than in the rest of the game. For example, like I said, against Morgan City, we were tied 11-11, and we came out to win by 12. Against Edie White, we were actually trailing 12-6 at the end of the first quarter. Edie White then proceeded to only score 20 points the rest of the game, which leads to the next point I wanted to bring up. That next point being the great defense that this team plays. And it is great defense. We played 19 games this season, and we've only given up 50 points 3 times. That is extremely strong. Against teams that we probably should have given up a lot more points to HL Bourgeois, Arclita Central Catholic, even in overtime, these sort of teams, we only gave up 45. We only gave up 47. We only gave up 43. These different scores that probably should have been a lot higher. But the way this team plays defense, the way this team goes out there, gets the ball, it's physicality. The physicality that this team brings that a lot of girls basketball teams don't bring is, I think, what puts it over the edge when it comes to defensive playing. And that win streak that I was talking about last week was at 5. Of course, anyone who can do math can figure out that it actually becomes, of course, 7 now. This team was 5-7 at one point, and looked like they were struggling, and then went on this great win streak. And now we're 12-7, and we're looking to knock off some of the best teams in our district. More on that in the main event. But before we get there, we of course have to discuss all of this week's previews. Not very much in the miscellaneous part this week in the junior high. 9th grade girls basketball hosts Edie White. That should be interesting considering they just watched their varsity teams play and are going to watch the varsity teams play. I think the day before, or maybe even, I think the day before that they're going to play again, this time at Edie White. I think this game is at Vanderbilt. So I'm very interested to see why that was done that way. I would almost think those games should have been the same day, but they were scheduled differently from what I saw. But it'll be an interesting game. It'll be a very good game to look at for the future of both of those programs. And, well, of course, every junior high game is like that. But it will be a very interesting game for that rivalry. Also, both the junior high boys and junior high girls teams, basketball, will be going to weekend tournaments this weekend. The junior high girls team is going to what I saw as a parish tournament. I'm not really sure what that means, but they're going to it. And the junior high boys team is going to Edie White for a junior high tournament. That should be interesting. I have enjoyed watching these boys play basketball all season, and I hope people go and support them there. It'll be a very interesting game. Moving on to, of course, the big 4 sports for right now. I'll start with boys soccer. So boys soccer begins the week hosting St. Charles Catholic. And man, this team is bad. They are 3-11 from what I saw. And that means there probably isn't a lot of time to spend on this game. It's a pretty simple win for us, I would hope at the very least. Then we have senior night the next day, hosting Morgan City. And it's an important game. Not as much for the opponent, not as much for the opponent as it is for the title. It is senior night, the last home game for boys soccer this season. And it should be a pretty simple one. We had We've had Morgan City in other sports as our senior night for a couple of games, and they've been mostly pretty simple victories, and I think that will be the case here as well. Morgan City's not a very good team. We beat them 7-1 early on in the season, and we should go on to have a similar result this game, excuse me. Then we travel to Hannon on Friday. This game is interesting. Against common opponents, it's pretty interesting. So we had a much better game against Parkview Baptist. Parkview Baptist is undefeated right now. They have, I think, 3 ties, and we are one of those ties, 1-1, compared to Hannon's blowout loss. I think it was 6-1 to Parkview Baptist. However, they have a much better game against St. Thomas Aquinas. We just lost to them, whereas they just beat St. Thomas Aquinas. They have a much better record. Against common opponents, it's sort of a push. It's pretty even. But in the power ranking poll, we are 7th in our division compared to their ranking of 10th in our division. And considering that this is a division, like both of us are in Division 3, this will be very important and interesting going into those implications, going into the playoffs, where those seedings will be for those power points. Because these teams are in the same division, it's going to be very, very important in regards to that. That's really everything for boys soccer this week. 3 games, one of which I think is going to be interesting. The other 2 I think are going to be blowouts. Moving on, we have girls soccer. Girls soccer begins the week, only has 2 games, begins the week with senior night versus Morgan City on Tuesday. Pretty similar situation. The boys will be a blowout, but it's still senior night. Go out there, support them, support both teams, boys and girls soccer. Interestingly enough, later on the week, on Friday, I'm pretty sure, we host Edie White. It's not senior night, but we are hosting Edie White. It is the actual final home game for the team. I guess they didn't want the rivalry game and senior night to be the same night, but okay. And the story writes itself here. These are 2 teams that hate each other. Edie White plays way above their record, way above their ranking when they play Vanderbilt, as we've seen this year already. When we traveled to Edie White early on in the season, we struggled. It was 2-2. It was a draw in a game that probably shouldn't have been a draw. However, this game is at Vanderbilt. All those bragging rights, all those district bragging rights, this is a district game. All of that, so important. And this time it's at Vanderbilt. And that's important. This is the true final home game of the season. This is against Edie White. This is for district bragging rights. This crowd is going to be absolutely monstrous. So, with all of that, this should be a win. It really should. And I hope to see that from our Terriers. It's a very interesting week for boys and girls soccer. Senior night, final home games, big games on Friday, and I hope to see, hopefully, some victories. I will now go ahead and move on to boys basketball. Boys basketball actually only has 1 game this week against Archbishop Shaw on Thursday. And looking at the breakdown, it'll be interesting. So, Shaw is not very good. They are in the same district as Rummel and Jesuit, and they tend to get blown out by those teams. Not Rummel, but they're in that district. They're in a very high, prestigious district, and they're kind of the punching bag of the district. And they have been for years. So their record is very bad, but they are ranked higher than us in both national and state rankings. But we're slightly higher in the class because I think we're in 2 different classes. However, if you look at a record against common opponents, which is something I bring up very constantly, very frequently in this series, their 2 games against our 2 common opponents at this point in the season are very scary to look at. They already blew out Thomas Jefferson, who we just lost to earlier this week, and they also blew out Ascension Episcopal compared to our lowly 8-point victory against them also earlier this season. Looking at that, this is scary. This is tough, but it's also a very important game. It's our only game this week. We've had plenty of rest, over a week of rest since our last game when we get here, and it is going to be very, very important regarding that. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and move on to girls basketball. Girls basketball, and the entire week of girls basketball, actually, gets the main event slot for this week. We have two very important games. I feel, and part of the reason they're getting this main event slot is because I feel a little bad for last week. So, a little bit of an explanation. Last week, I had recorded a guest interview with Coach Jerwoski Coleman, and unfortunately, the audio didn't record for that video, which made me unable, of course, to upload it. If you're wondering, if you go back to that video and watch the specific wording, it is a little weird because I had to basically edit it out. I didn't realize at the point of recording that I was not able to put in the interview. So I edited it out as best as I could, but the wording is still a little bit weird from that video last week. So it probably should have been the main event last week. It is, of course, the rivalry game, a home game, very important week for the girls basketball team. So this week, I'm going to go ahead and decide to make the girls basketball team their entire week, actually, the main event. Both the Tuesday game at Edie White and the Friday game hosting at South Terrebonne. I'm going to start with the Tuesday game at Edie White. We covered this game last week for the Tuesday game hosting Edie White, except this one's a district game. And it's pretty simple to preview, very similar to last week. We just beat them last week. Their record is very poor. This is not only a must-win to keep our momentum going, hopefully instead extend that win streak to 8, but it also should be a win. It's a rivalry game, of course, so all bets are off when it comes to this team's good, this team's bad. We saw that with soccer earlier this season. But this is Vanderbilt, this is Edie White, I understand that. But this should also be a victory. Hopefully we'll be able to beat them for the second time this season. And assuming that we do beat them, that makes this game against South Terrebonne all the more interesting. South Terrebonne is the highest ranked team in our district. This is a district game. They are 17-3 this season. Number 5 in the class, almost top 25 in the state, 85% win percentage. Absolutely great team. And that 17-3 record looks even better when comparing it to our 12-7 record. However, we average a few more points per game. This game is on the road. South Terrebonne is undefeated at home compared to their measly 7-3 record on the road, which makes this game a lot more winnable. Another thing is that they were on like a 6 or 7 game win streak going into last week. Then they lost to South Lafourche, 37-29. They had a very hard time scoring in that game, of course. And that break of momentum, again, hopefully assuming that we are going to move on and beat Edie White to extend our win streak to 8, is going to hopefully, now they have one more game. They have one more game next week against Ellender, I think, on Tuesday before we play them. But we're going to hopefully have the momentum going into that game, and maybe we can pull the upset. South Terrebonne is going to be favored by anyone who talks about the game. They're, again, 5th in the class, 26th in the state, 17-3. Great team, probably favored to win the district at this point. But we're getting hot at the right time, getting hot right into district, and hopefully we can pull the victory. It'll be a very interesting game. Again, it'll be at home. We're a little bit better at home. And we can hopefully go on and win that game. I hope to see that. I hope to see everyone there. I hope to see everyone who can go there. I will unfortunately not be able to make the game, but I hope to see a victory from the Terriers against Edie White. I'm going to go ahead and finish us off. Thank you for tuning in this week for the first time live. Anyone who did show up. For those who want to see specific parts, I talked about this a little bit earlier on. I will be uploading specific clips throughout the week. That girls basketball main event I will be uploading probably sometime in the week for those who just want to see that part. For boys basketball, girls soccer, boys soccer, all those different parts, I'll be uploading if anyone wants to see specific clips. It'll hopefully make it a little bit more convenient for those. Next week, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the live stream later on in the day. So next week I'm going to have a performance in the show. I have a very busy week. I have a performance in the show on Sunday, which is why originally this show was going to be at 8:30, and I decided to keep it there despite the show getting moved today. Next week, the show is going to be on Sunday at 2 o'clock. I'm going to see if I want to have the show later on in the day, because I think part of the reason that there aren't that many people here is because it is 9 in the morning, 9:30 now. So we'll see. I'll probably move the show to a later date in the day every week. Probably somewhere near 7-ish. We'll just have to see when we get there. I'll talk about it more throughout the week. I'll probably announce it once I confirm a specific time. But for now, that's all it's going to be. I'll see you guys next week. Maybe not the same time, but definitely the same channel. See ya.